wherever it is, whatever people want to do after a long day. It was a very interesting session that we just heard on trade and investment. Now, this particular session has a wider mosaic than what the earlier sessions had, and therefore it is going to be more enjoyable. We're going to deal with a variety of topics: education, energy, agriculture, and an important issue which was raised since the morning has been reverberating is people-to-people contact from a journalist, panelist, Mr. Manish. But before I invite the panel to speak, let me give you a brief introduction about me and the organization that I head. Cuts International is a 31-year-old NGO headquartered in Jaipur, Rajasthan. It works on a wide variety of economic policy issues, other than also a lot of grassroots work in southern Rajasthan. We have been practicing South-South cooperation, and particularly in Africa, since the last 25 years. We have our own centers in Lusaka, Zambia, Nairobi in Kenya, and Accra in Ghana. And we also have two more overseas centers, one in Geneva and the other in Hanoi, which works in Southeast Asia. So we are covering a very large part of Asia and Africa in the kind of work we are doing. All our centers, incidentally, are managed and run by citizens of that particular country who have been working with us. All of them have been working with us for over 10 years now. We believe in building local capacities rather than transferring capacities from elsewhere into those countries. And the kind of work that we do, by and large research and advocacy, as I said, on economic policy issues, trade policy, investment, competition, etc. What we've been able to achieve over a period of time is to transfer knowledge and skills in how to deal with this and build up local capacities in a manner. And we've built up a very large network of local researchers who still remain connected with us and network with us. So we have built in, I would say, a very strong asset base in terms of the Indian goodwill in these particular areas, and that is something which we are proud of, and it is also has had a spillover effect or a multiplier effect in expanding the horizons of the kind of software work that we do. Software, in a sense, is not IT software but knowledge software, which I think is one very important skill which India can lend to a large number of countries. We've also been supported by the Ministry of External Affairs in this particular work. And mainly our support has come from DFID, mainly. And there have been other donors, the Norwegians, the Swedes, and so on and so forth, in what we define as trilateral development cooperation. There is a southern provider, southern recipient, and a northern donor. And that model has worked very well. It is also called triangular cooperation, and something which we've been asking the government of India to pursue in the sense, and this could help to enlarge the kitty. But that said, let me now turn to the panelists. Let me begin with Dr. Rahul Tongia, Fellow of Brookings, India, who's going to speak about the potential of cooperation on energy, in as much as Rahul is an old friend, since he's been working with us on green energy particularly. We ourselves do have problems in our own energy front, but so is we've done work on the energy area in Eastern and Southern Africa as well. There are very similar problems. Right, over to you, Rahul.
Thank you.
And how long would you take?
Whatever you suggest, a little less than that.
Well, about an hour?
Much less than than that. 5 minutes as opening, 5-7 minutes.
5-7 minutes. Thank you very much.
So, as we've heard, India and Africa, especially on the energy front, are somewhat similar, but they're in a relatively low level of development by global and especially Western standards, which prompts the question, what makes sense for India and Africa to collaborate, especially when either from an infrastructure scale point of view, no country on earth has ever matched China. To give you perspective on that, in a single year, China has added multiple times 100,000 megawatts of capacity, which is unprecedented. US, Europe, any of these places. India has typically had challenges but met 20, 22, somewhere in that range. China's been at a different scale. So the question, that's a legitimate question, is what's going on, what makes sense from an India to Africa perspective. And I think answering that may involve looking at what's similar, what's different, and why it may be strategically valuable as a win-win on both sides. At a personal level, I worked a little bit on energy in Africa in a past life as a professor at Carnegie Mellon. And more than just energy, I've also worked in the IT telecom space, where some of the work on how to leapfrog for Africa, and not just Africa, my work on, for many countries, caught the attention of the leadership in Rwanda, who invited us to come, and it led to the first US university setting up a campus in sub-Saharan Africa. So I'm happy to share that there are positive steps. So I have an educational link to Africa, as well as IT and energy. I promise you I'm not looking at cricket scores or election scores or anything. My notes are on my phone only. So like India, Africa is heterogeneity. It's not monolithic. And of course, Africa is a number of countries, whether it's 48 or 53, when people say Africa, sub-Saharan Africa is what many people refer to, regardless of whether you separate them or not. But one fact that's very important is it's 24 times the size of India in the area. And why that's relevant is because of density and reach when we talk about something like electrification. On the side note, we should stop using Mercator maps because that really distorts people's perspectives on size and scale. So if we take out South Africa, which is sort of the elephant in the room when it comes to the scale of electrification in sub-Saharan Africa, the capacity is only on the order of 30 gigawatts. I don't have the most updated number offhand, it's in that order, for 860 million people. And we have several regional grids. There is no African electricity grid. There's the South Africa Power Pool, there's Western, there's Eastern, and almost all of these have an anchor country, which is the major supplier. So obviously ESCOM, South Africa is there, you've got larger countries, you've got Ghana, Nigeria in the west, you've got Kenya playing an anchor role, or Uganda, or different places in different areas. But you don't have a continental grid by any stretch. To give some perspective, in terms of consumption, kilowatt hours or units, sub-Saharan Africa consumed 139 billion units. This is 2014 numbers. I have to check whether it excludes South Africa. And this was for some 800 plus million people. Spain, with 47 million people, had a consumption of 243. So almost double. In perspective, India consumed on the order of 750 billion units last year, 700 something, for a population of 1.2 billion. So looking at these trends, not only is the per capita consumption in Africa about a third lower than India, on average. You've got a lot of variance and disparity across countries, and then within countries as well. And so if we just extrapolate the rate of electrification for household level, projections are 2075, 2080 before we have universal access. So this raises the first sort of human imperative why it's worthwhile for global players, including India, including others, to look at Africa. It's not just a market, which it is. Anytime you have a low base, sounds good. But also there's a human imperative. I'm going to focus a little more on electricity, that's more my area, but we all know that there are countries rich in oil and gas, but historically they have not developed as much, especially helping their own people. Nigeria is this sort of classic example talked about in textbooks from that. The lesson from India, the difference between India and Africa is India has already reached the majority of its villages. Out of 600,000 villages in India, around 18,000 remote villages, as they're called, don't have electrification. The wire reaches most villages. That is not necessarily the case in Africa. Then you've got the household level access. Once it reaches the village, does it go to the homes? That's where both India and Africa have challenges. And then the third layer is, even if you've got a wire to your house, are you being load shed? You have supply on that wire. And that's also where both India and Africa have similar challenges. But the number of villages reached in India is far higher. It's the overwhelming majority, so 95% plus. While in Africa, you've got it as low as 20%, 30% in some countries. At a village level, forget household level, where there are countries less than 10% electrified. So, if we talk of where India and China could collaborate, India and Africa have some synergy potentials. One is on the supply side. What are the fuels, technologies where there is Indian expertise? Coal is the mainstay of, for example, South Africa, and India also has expertise in coal, but now India is talking about cleaner coal, critical, supercritical, and advanced coal technologies. Nuclear power, there's only South Africa as of now having nuclear power, but a number of African countries have talked of the nuclear future, and this is something where environmentalists don't know whether the world will or shouldn't have nuclear power, because to some people it is a greener, meaning non-carbon form of energy. And so once the safeguards and mechanisms are put in place, there's a possibility one could actually have collaborations for nuclear power. Microgrids are an area where Africa, people say that is the future. Instead of the traditional centralized grid, you have microgrids using local resources, both renewable as well as somewhat more traditional. India already has had some amount of growth of microgrids, especially in areas that are underserved, which includes parts of UP, Bihar, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand. So certainly microgrids would be one area of collaboration. Now, microgrids itself have many variants and flavors. Does it mean isolated from the grid? Does it mean interfacing with the grid and being opportunistic? All of these models are being developed. The US model of a microgrid is one of resiliency, especially after Hurricane Sandy. So that model is not what Africa or India are really chasing. It's not a backup grid necessarily. Smart grids are another area where India is evolving its own flavor of smart grids, and these may be more amenable to Africa's needs, where they're dealing with shortfalls, where you're often dealing with high theft or leakage in certain countries. Those are problems that India is looking to technology to solve. Balancing the grid when you're in a shortfall situation is something where India is putting a lot of effort into, and it has made actually rather impressive strides in the last 2 to 5 years. The numbers, people still have this mental model saying that a third of electricity in India is stolen. That's no longer the case at all in India. Another area where there will be synergy in smart grids is really using information to harness efficiency, to harness different willingness to pay. Any person on diesel, we know, is clearly willing to pay for electricity, but at the same time, diesel's often imported, and it's certainly expensive. And so what are ways that you could end shortfalls, at least for those who are willing to pay the full, true cost? If once people are willing to pay the cost of electricity, then it's always easy to add more supply. So getting that balance from a pricing point of view is also what it takes. Now, more than just electricity, agriculture-related energy is probably another area, because both regions have large populations that are dependent on agriculture. So agriculture for lifting, energy for lifting water, energy for cold storage, energy for supply chain. These are probably 3 areas where there will be a lot of synergies. One hears the story of trickle pumps, pedal-powered pumps. One model was called Moneymaker, and it reportedly raised Kenya's GDP by 1%. So things like lifting water have an enormous impact on agrarian lifestyle. India, of course, has some of the world's most ambitious solar programs, and hydropower also is very big in Africa, but again, concentrated in a few pockets. But now India is embarking on micro-hydro, because it's less destructive to the environment. So that could also be relevant to the African case. Then on the consumption side, cook stoves, improved efficiency cook stoves, which reduce air pollution, those are very key, and these are similar issues for both India and Africa. And then another example is LEDs. Government of India has a remarkable program on how to bring down the price of LEDs through government procurement and standardization and quality and warranty, where in 18 months the price of an LED bulb went for a 7-watt LED from 300 something rupees an LED bulb down to 70 something rupees for a 9-watt LED in 18 months, which is unprecedented at the global scale. So figuring out sort of supply chain innovation, marketing innovations are also areas where there could be synergies, and it could include, maybe in the short term, products manufactured in India, but eventually also manufactured in Africa and wherever it makes sense. So, in closing, there's no one thing that makes sense as a partnership. Energy itself is a broad, heterogeneous term, and so we're going to need and have a bunch of different technologies with different time scales, with different ownerships, different IPR, and it's going to be all of the above. Just like when people say, how do you become sustainable? Is it this, is it this, is it this? It's all of the above that we need to be working on. And in closing, this question that came up, China vis-a-vis India, I think the Indian model may be more aligned to a longer-term view for Africa, in that Indian technologies have typically been globally standardized. China has often gone with homegrown standards, closed standards, proprietary standards. This is true especially in the smart grid space or telecom space. In the Indian smart grids, these are very globally aligned to both Europe. For historical reasons, the Indian technologies of communications and electricity are more European than North American, but it's been more open. So a more open technology platform may be beneficial to Africa, which is going to then benefit from global competition. So it's not just about India per se, but really global competition coming in to bring down prices as well as foster local innovation. Thank you.
Thank you, Rahul. That's very interesting. I think probably the kind of struggles that you're having with the own power sector offers a lot of lessons for sub-Saharan African countries. I think that could be the central message of your presentation. May I turn to Dr. Hanchinal? How do I pronounce it? Is your name?
Hanchinal.
Hanchinal.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Actually, love is, but it's love.
So, 7 minutes?
Yeah, about
10.
10 minutes or so.
10 minutes. I don't think anybody is using PowerPoints.
I brought PowerPoints. If you want, I will.
Can you
throw PowerPoint?
That may take you longer. You want to do it from here?
Yeah, I think PowerPoint will be better. Whatever the time it gives, that much I can.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much for giving me an opportunity. See, India and Africa share the long history in case of trade, friendship, and cooperation. For example, the sorghum that we eat, particularly in Peninsular India, it comes from India. It was evolved in Africa and came to here through traders. Like that, millets and all the pulses, coffee, etc. And again, the challenges are similar to India. Here, 17% of the world population, here 15%. And again, we are also facing the nutritional security, they are facing the food security, nutritional security, and also the health security. And we are very rich in climatic resources, they are also very rich, and we have also lost a lot of it, and they have also lost a lot of it. And if you take the climatic conditions, we have tropical, subtropical, arid, and temperate climate. Same thing is there also. And again, if you take, of course, the temperate region is very, I think only one hill is there, that is the Kilimanjaro, that's the only thing, otherwise this temperate climate is not there. And agroclimatic zones are almost similar, and the soil conditions are also similar, and crop zones are also similar. But the India had the advantage of green revolution. That's how we could solve the food problem and food security we could achieve. But this did not happen in Africa, and there is a major difference with the Africa and here. And again, because of the favorable decisions that took place, particularly in the seed industry legislations, that is the enactment of Seed Act in 1966, that actually boosted India to become the world order as far as the seed industry is concerned. Now there are more than 500 organized seed companies. And again, the seed certification system in India is very strong. We have 20+ seed certification agencies and 108 notified seed testing labs and other things. And again, we are members of OECD and other things. And also, we have well-established exam policy and well-established regulatory framework, which is very, very important. And because of that, we could achieve a lot, and we could record food production of 264 million tons and about 170 million tons of the vegetables and even fruits also we could eat. And this is, and again, I should appreciate that the public investment and the private investment is very good here. And because of this, from 5 million tons, we could reach up to 95 million tons in case of wheat. And again, in case of maize, because the public and private partnership, we could achieve a lot. And in case of cotton, only the private partnership could achieve a lot. And because of this, our seed market growth is going in a very big way. Now we are almost more than 16,000 crore rupee business every year holding, and it is the growth rate is also around 12 to 15%. And now presently we are exporting only few crops, that is maize and rice is the major one, and we are exporting cotton to Myanmar, South Korea, sunflower. 60% of Pakistan's sunflower is from us, and we have a great scope to export seeds to Africa, particularly both hybrids and the open pollinated varieties. But if you look into the African conditions where I worked for some time, West Africa 90 to 98% is all the informal seed production that takes place there, and South and East Africa is a little better. And again, people use on-farm sharing of seeds, and there is a major this one. And contribution of farmer seed sector is very, very low. It is less than 10%. That's how there is a great scope for Indian seed companies to go there and do that. And most of the African countries are small in geographical area, and again, there it needs a common seed law for a particular region. When I was working in West Africa, which constitutes of 15 plus 2, 17 countries, ECOWAS countries, and there we try to work to have a common seed law there. And if that is there, then only we can achieve more. And again, there is ample investment opportunities in seed market. And because, as always said, the agroclimatic conditions quite similar, and varieties developed here, certainly they will perform very well there, and it has been proved also. And again, some of the past experiences that I would like to give, I was working with the West African Seed Alliance, USAID funded project, and there we could evaluate some the hybrids, particularly in rice, maize, sorghum, millet, that is bajra, they call it as millet there, and the varieties and hybrids, particularly in Mali, Nigeria, Niger, Ghana. And that indicated, our evaluation in 2008-9 indicated large potentiality for Indian seed companies to go there. But the negative points also are not negative. There are some important factors which attribute to the yield, the early maturity of crops. Because of the high yields, the crops get there, they are about 10 to 15 days early mature when compared to Indian conditions. The best scenario and this scenario is something different. No irrigation facility. That's what Rahul was telling me. I'll tell my own story. When I was based in Bamako, I used to go for walk, morning walk all along the Niger River. There the small farmers used to lift the water from bucket and irrigate to the vegetable. This is the scenario there, and they don't have any concept. This is, I really used to wonder if that much water would have been there in India, would have done wonders in irrigation there here, and they can tell more on that. And skilled manpower is another big problem there, and if at all we have to establish any industry, we have to train the local power, we cannot take everybody there. And constraints on farm machinery is also very, very important issue that we have to look into. What is the step ahead in promotion of seed industry with all these problems? In my opinion, we have to study the soil and agroclimatic conditions of the targeted region where we would like to work, whether we would like to work in the West Africa or East Africa or in the central part or so. And again, the multi-location field testing of varieties and hybrids in different zones is needed. And looking to the climatic conditions and agroclimatic conditions, we have to select the varieties and try. And identification for development of farm is needed to that because there is no much trained people are available. And under such circumstances, how we can work that also, particularly seed processing equipments are very much needed. And capacity building of the local youth is also very much very much needed. And as I was telling you, the multi-location trials conducted on hybrids, particularly the rice, sorghum, maize, bulb millet, that is the millet, gave more than 40% increase in yield. That itself speaks the scope of the Indian seed industry to invest there. And particularly in case of vegetables, both varieties and hybrids, there is a greater scope there. And what results we could get is the product developed in India perform really better in Africa. Only the institutional mechanism we have to work out there and identify at national level what are the needs. And again, we have to address the specific needs and formulate the strategic plan for engaging the African seed sector. And we have to work with them. There is no concept of seed sector there in some countries, and in some countries we try to establish the seed producers associations and small seed companies also, and we have to work with them. As the multinational companies, I may be a little old, my experience may be a little old. At that time, they were not ready to invest, but we have a great scope to invest there and work. With this, we can achieve the food security, nutritional security, and health security in African countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hanchinal. That was well in time. May I request Mr. Surinder Makhija? 8 minutes.
I might take it long. I have some unused credit from Hyderabad, I believe. One of our friends from Nigeria mentioned about sustainable agriculture development in Africa, and that is the topic of my discussion. Before I commence my presentation, I want to convey very good news. Last month, the Fortune 500 magazine in US, and it does shortlist 100 companies globally, the best companies in their own field. And I'm very happy to know that my company, Jain Irrigation System, was ranked 7th globally in terms of the good work they have done in creating impact in 5 million farmers in India. Thank you. Very recently, the company also got the Michael Porter Award. You know, Michael Porter is a marketing guru. And 2 weeks back, we got the Michael Porter Award also. So this is a citation in this magazine, Fortune 500. What are the challenges in Africa? I'm sure they're common to India also, the increase in population and expected demand to go up by 100% by 2050 or so. And there's also, apart from food demand in fiber, particularly in fodder, because in Africa a very large population depends upon the cattle as a meat. And there's also got to be some margin cap for the adverse impact of climatic changes on the crop yields. So what is the way forward? Now, agriculture, as we all say, and at least I insist on, has to be science-based, technology-driven. And this is not exclusive for India alone, and the same applies for Africa. They don't have to reinvent the wheel. And I feel it's necessary that they should follow the Indian example of making sure that the farmers get good variety of planting material, seeds, and they are also given proper training in crop management, and also soil health and monitoring is necessary. Actually, in the sub-Saharan region, I have had the opportunity of working in Africa for almost 2 decades now, and I have traveled extensively. In the sub-Saharan region of Africa, the soils are pretty good, very high in carbon and biomass. But still, it's necessary that the farmers should get, like we have in India now, the soil health card, a certain amount of knowledge about the soil condition. And technology-driven, the use of mechanization, such as improved farm tools, if not very high-end machineries and implements, irrigation systems. Just now somebody said, my friend said that there is enough water there, but they use buckets to carry the water. And that's something very, very primitive. And in an age of exponential technology, when we talk about disruptive technology globally as such, should the farmer in Africa be denied of the opportunity of having the basic tool for doing a decent agricultural operation? Then again, the subsistence or the peasant agriculture has to change and pave way for agribusiness. The entire idea is that the farmer is not merely a slave to produce more for the nation. So far, what we have been doing is that we have been clamoring for more and more production without bothering whether he really earns more. And this problem has taken India at least to a situation where the younger generation is no longer interested in agriculture. So I hope our African friends understand that they've got to make sure that the farmers earn more, and then only they'll be interested in doing agriculture. Agriculture is not exactly the main profession, is not done very scientifically in Africa in most parts that I have seen. And one thing what we had done in our country in 1980 when the Indian banks were nationalized, because strengthened the institutional finance availability to the farmers. State Bank of India has got 10,000 branches. There are a large number of branches all over India, and the farmers get short-term loans as crop loans. They get long-term loans for buying some equipment, and the same must be done in case of Africa, in case we want to have a sustainable development. The other day I was talking to one of the African ambassadors, and he was mentioning that in case my farmer can get $60 loan to buy good seeds, he can do wonders. Probably he can, out of $60 loan from a microfinance organization, he can earn $360. I was in the US, in California last month, and I traveled from, I heard a lot about the drought in California. This is the second year of drought in the US. Now I therefore drove from San Francisco to Los Angeles, which is pretty uncommon. People normally fly over there, just to study the drought-like situation. I was amazed to see that practically every second field in that area, California, which is the Punjab of US, was vacant without any agriculture. It's a very productive land, and every field which was lying vacant had a notice like no water, no jobs. Or the next one shows the anger, is growing food, wasting water. Or somebody writes dams or trains or water for agriculture. So this can happen in USA. Imagine what can happen in a country like India or Africa where water shortage is there, or in case a drought-like situation emerges persistently over the years. So it makes it all the more necessary that we must preserve water. And water forms a key element for any sustainable agricultural development. And this metric I got from social media says it by itself that what was the situation of availability of water in 1960, but it is now in 2013, and if you don't take care, water will be very scarce. So what's the way forward? That we must conserve water and make optimal use of water. And we see that by using micro-irrigation system, the country, small country like Israel is a major exporter of fruits and vegetables to Europe, and they are able to use 100% of the area using micro-irrigation system, be it drip irrigation or sprinkler system. And our own Prime Minister has been saying that per drop, no crop, which enables a calibrated application of water with calibrated application of nutrients and fertilizers. This is the matrix of how water is used, and this comparison of development versus the use of water in various sectors in globe You can see that Europe uses 33% water in agriculture and 54% in industry, whereas in Africa they use 88%, and in India we use 82%. This legacy can continue for a very, very long time in case we got to meet completely the amount of other sectors also. So what is to be done? Water needs to be harvested. Water needs to be stored in a safe manner where water cannot go waste, and it must be available for irrigation purpose. And this is one example we have taken from Andhra Pradesh. And this is an example of corporate social responsibility done by my company, Jain Irrigation System in Jaipur. And no wonder they got this award from Fortune 500. This is a river next to the city of Jaipur. This is a seasonal river. They built a dam called Tantai Bandara at a cost of about $2 million. And the result is the water is available for 14 villages along this river. And we also get some share of water from this water store. I mentioned about we are in the age of exponential technologies. So when we talk about, see what happened in the last 20 years time where technology has gone, and we totally disruptive from 1995 to 2015. And we also got to make sure that when we are living in this age of disruptive technology, the farmer should get some taste, some flavor of some modern technology, some modern tools for irrigation purpose, for their agricultural operations. Filter irrigation is one of them. And so is the drip irrigation system. It helps not only in saving water, but also enhancing the crop yield from 50% to 300%. There was a myth initially that drip irrigation system is merely meant for saving water, but over the years it was felt that calibrated application of water with plant nutrients and fertilizers, it saves water. Next initiative I'm suggesting is the solar pump. And the solar pump can make, so I tell you, in Addis Ababa when we had a stall there, in this similar initiative 3 years back, we put up this solar pump there. And this was the next response from the delegates there. And in Africa, I can tell you that this is something which can do wonders there because power is not there, and one solar pump in the hinterland can enable the community to get drinking water and also some water for irrigation purpose, and also maybe some lighting for the community. So greenhouse is there, and enable the farmers through institutional finance, strengthen the banking system, short-term loans for seeds and fertilizers, long-term loans for capital equipment, and agribusiness entrepreneurs, because in India we have the advantage of having agribusiness entrepreneurs all over the country. But in Africa, in case you want to buy a nut or a bolt, maybe a small band or a tea as such, I can tell you most of it comes from South Africa, whether you're in Congo or even in Kenya. So there is hardly any small-scale sector industry there, hardly any enterprise which really caters to this kind of requirement. Now, if an investor goes to Africa, the one big problem I have seen, I have been dealing with large number of Indian investors who virtually went like an exodus to Africa in the last 5-6 years' time. They made a lot of investments there, be it Ethiopia, be it Mozambique, or any other country for that matter. If they invested about $60-70 million and they needed another $30-40 million to sustain, they were not able to get it. The banking sector in Africa, I maintain, is not strong enough, it is not good enough, and if Africa has to really come up well, whether in the sector of agriculture or in any other sector as such, it has got to make sure that the investors who come over there, if they need matching funds or matching grant, or at least some 30 or 40% of their investment as such, they should be able to raise that money from the local banks.
Thank you. Would you like to conclude?
The last one, that's the training. The training of, this is something, sir, I'm very experience.
You already mentioned it.
Training.
No, I'm skills.
Yes, skills.
Capacity building, you already
how it is important, I'll show the examples of that. You see, what has really happened and why Africa has not come forward is that because they have taken examples from the West. They imported technology from the West which were not really doing well without any capacity building, without any skill development. And you can see the example of this very nice installation but very poor maintenance. And then what really happened is that, and there hardly any training of the farmers. So look at the tomato crop I have seen in northern part of Ethiopia. Now what happens to this crop? After 2 months is that the crop rots in the field because nobody has told them.
I would like to suggest if you could conclude because it's already 15 minutes.
This is a tomato crop in that part. This is a tomato crop in India. And we get about 10 times the yield. And this is the irrigation equipment that they have imported from some part of the world as such. And after some time it's not working because there is lack of the training and skill development there.
Thank you very much. Now we had these two, the first presentation was on electricity and these last two presentations were on agriculture. What comes across very clearly is that there's the very known issues of resource constraints and institutional constraints. And the suggestion made by both the speakers is relevant, and I think what we have been practicing ourselves is to define it as transfer of appropriate knowledge. Using the terminology from appropriate technology, there are a lot of things which you can learn from each other in terms of appropriate knowledge. Knowing that these are resource constraints, there are governance deficit, and huge amount of problems are quite common. But even within those constraints, you could transfer a lot of knowledge and as well as assistance for them to overcome the kind of problem that you're suggesting. And now turn to Professor Milindo Chakarbarti. He's going to speak on education. And Professor, how long will you take?
No, if I don't use a presentation, a PowerPoint presentation, then I will take less than 10 minutes. So I prefer to skip the presentation here.
Thank you very much.
And try to concentrate on the main issues that I would like to discuss.
Thank you very much.
I would like to look at India-Africa partnership in higher education from the perspective of South-South cooperation. The reason I am making this statement very clear is the fact that South-South cooperation, among many of its principles, exemplify two basic fundamental principles. That one is the issue of demand-driven partnership, and the second one is the issue of mutual benefit accruing to the partners out of this cooperation. I try to look at the issue of higher education from this perspective because recently, in 2013, the African Union came out with an Agenda 2063, where they laid out their wish list as to what they want to achieve in the coming 60 to 50 years. And one of the most important targets that they have set for themselves is achieving a high rate of growth of higher education in Africa. There were some numbers which were there on my slides. I am not going to raise those issues, numbers here. But the fundamental point that they want to achieve is to have a high growth of gross enrollment ratio in higher education and to come at par with the world average, at least in about 10-15 years. And incidentally, the gross enrollment ratio in higher education in Africa has been growing at a very steady rate. From a little below 4% in 2000, it has climbed up to 8 point something in 2012. And they also have identified some fundamental numbers that how many of their population, young population going to the universities should study science and technology, how many of them should go for some other courses, and so on and so forth. But simultaneously, they are facing a lot of challenges as well. The challenges are in terms of lack of enough seats in higher education institutions in Africa. And as a result, the quantum of unmet demand for higher education is increasing by leaps and bounds. This is tried to be solved through privatization of higher education, but that is also not enough yet in Africa. It was found there was a higher education summit in Dakar, Senegal in 2015 March. They found that there is a mushrooming of higher education institutions on the one hand, so the quantity problem is going to be solved to some extent, not to the full extent, but the quality problem is getting accentuated a lot. There are lack of faculty members, there are lack of research facilities, not much of scope for post-graduation and PhD programs in higher education. And on top of that, what is very interesting and not quite expected, unlike in India, because all these issues that I am discussing about Africa are true to a large extent for India as well. But what is very important to say is that the cost of higher education in Africa, even in public universities, are going up at a very rapid rate. Because the students are sort of asked to pay for the fees to a large extent, in case of large number of public universities as well. I have a chart here, I am not presenting it, but it is comparable, the fees charged by private universities in South Africa and in some other countries as well are comparable to the fees charged by private universities in India here. So from that perspective, I feel that there is a huge scope for a mutually beneficial sort of a partnership between India and Africa from the perspective of higher education. But there are certain problems which are necessary to be taken care of in the context of Indian higher education system, so that this situation can be mutual benefits can be taken out of this situation. Number one, if foreign students are to be encouraged into the Indian system, it is absolutely necessary that a separate accreditation system for the universities which will be offering education to global students is to be formed. Because the accreditation system that we have in India in the name of NAC do not take care of the requirements or the standards that are necessary to fulfill the requirements of the global students. So a separate accreditation system is absolutely necessary, otherwise some Indian universities are earning a very bad name abroad when they are admitting or enrolling students from foreign countries. In this context, I personally feel, and I have seen it, that the respective Indian high commissions and embassies in the African countries can play a very positive role in informing the African constituents about the quality and the role of universities and their capabilities to the African students in their respective countries. The third requirement that I find is very, very important, because I see that most of the students from Africa, they join here in different professional courses. As a part of their curriculum, they are expected to go through some hands-on training during their vacations. And many of these students, not being accustomed to the Indian business scenario, are not offered internship by the Indian companies. And I was listening to some of the speakers here in the previous session, where they were saying that they had to do a lot of efforts to develop business models in African countries. I think this is a win-win situation for Indian corporates as well as the African students who are coming here. They can be utilized meaningfully and effectively in helping develop business models and going through the necessary researches that are required at the corporate level. And they can provide very intimate inputs about the nature and the nature of the market and the characteristics of the market that prevail in a certain country or in a certain economy. So if foreign students in general and African students in particular are to be encouraged more to join the Indian universities, it is absolutely necessary that a sort of an institutional relationship between corporate sector and universities are developed so that each can take benefit of one another. And just one more point. Have I got short of time?
Yeah, go ahead.
And the last one, and that will, I am sure, will attract the attention of the chair, especially. Because I have seen that although we are having students from several African countries, there remains a very strong cultural divide between the students from our own country and the students from Africa within the campus, university campuses. And that also often acts as a deterrent for the African students to come and enjoy their life within the campus. So again, I feel that the CSOs can play a very important role in creating a social immersion programs for the African students here so that they can get some idea, feel for the social life here. And on the other hand, those on the other side of the table, they also get some idea about the social lives they are from. So I think these four important components can be very effective in making a highly mutually beneficial partnership in higher education between India and Africa. And finally, I would like to give two more suggestions or recommendations for consideration. Number one, India is very fast developing a model, a sort of an institutional structure to assist in skill development of university students. Whether in terms of our high-tech programs or the other programs that the ministry has, whether some African students can also be engaged into this skill development program. The quota of 900 African scholarships every year. Because for last few years, this quota is not being fulfilled. A good amount of these ICCF scholarships to African countries are lying unutilized. And several arguments have also been raised in the literature, but I think this also requires a thorough relook as to why and what sort of institutional structure are necessary to take care of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Milindo. I think the last point which you made is something very worth exploring by FIDC in particular, because unutilization is certainly quite bad. But the point which you made in terms of the kind of cultural divide, and it seamlessly goes into the next speaker's slot, Mr. Manish to speak about people-to-people contact. And this is a problem which has been discussed even in the morning, particularly by the Ethiopian ambassador as well. Over to you.
Thank you, Chairman Mehta. Thank you, RIS, Dr. Chakarbarti, organizers, for making me part of this very important project of building multi-layered relationship between India and Africa, the two growth poles of the world. Indeed, it's a unique moment in India-Africa relations. Afro-optimism we have seen in this room is quite infectious. The narratives of a rising India and the unfolding African resurgence are intersecting at multiple points, opening up new avenues for deepening and ramifying this relationship. The missing actor in this discourse is what I call 3 C's, which is culture, creativity, and communication. We heard in the morning inaugural session, Ethiopian ambassador to India speaking about distorted portrayals or the absence of Africa in Indian media landscape. Now this is a recurrent refrain coming from the African diplomatic community. It's almost a lament of sorts that, you know, Western countries write negatively about us, but you guys don't even take notice of us. So you know, this exclusion of a diverse, vibrant continent from public discourse is so glaring that we need to do something about it and not just lament about it. So I call what I'm saying is the business of transforming perceptions, because it has to be taken seriously. Mere ritualistic lament is not enough. So talking about the public perception of Africa, we've heard many articulations this morning where people spoke about Africa as a, you know, often seen as a continent. When you say you're going to Africa as though they're, you know, it's one country and all that. But that apart, I mean, again coming by way of formulating, you know, chaos, conflict, crisis. They continue to color perception, the public perception of Africa. 3C. Now, in this room and in the academic community, we heard 3 R's, which is resurgence, renewal, and renaissance. But this message of African resurgence, which is for real, needs to be broadcasted and projected onto a larger audience, and that requires a concerted strategy. You know, speakers before me spoke about upscaling economic and strategic relationships, but you know, you cannot have the full blossoming of the relationship in a cultural vacuum of sorts. There's a forbidding knowledge and information deficit. Various stakeholders have to come together. The private sector cannot just be talking about, I heard about brilliant initiatives like PIDA and CETA and new acronyms emerging, but at the same time, you know, hard infrastructure is not enough. You know, talking about India-China, which has been a subtext running through the discussions, this is where we can really scope. Soft infrastructure is where we need to focus on, creating the dialogue of ideas, bringing a wider network of stakeholders, and saying that the media does not take notice is not enough. I think the private sector also needs to put money there. You know, I mean, it's not enough to set up just, you know, industries. So that's one part of it. The second part I want to talk about, when you talk about stereotypes, there are 2 kinds of stereotypes which continue to clutter public perception. One, of course, I spoke about crisis, conflict, and catastrophe, and all that. And the second is exotic stereotyping. You know, there is the Africa of spectacular sunsets, of waterfalls, of haunting beauty, of jungle safari, and all that. And there is other Africa. The real Africa in the process is missing largely from public perception and public discourse. So how do we go about it? Before I come to it, I also want to talk about another very important factor which has not been emphasized enough, which is the role of creative and cultural industries. Now when we talk about Africa, another cliche description is Africa is a resource-rich country. My submission is that, and I've always maintained that we should change that. We need a new vocabulary to speak about India-Africa relations. We should start describing it people-rich, talent-rich. You know, Africa is a veritable carnival of creativity, talent, and enterprise there. But sadly, that African cultural industry products only account for 1% of the world's creative economy. This is due to lack of infrastructure and expertise to commercialize those creative talents into money, cash, hard. Africa's culture industries, as studies have shown, can make a real difference to the ongoing African resurgence. They can create new jobs, they can help African countries earn more foreign exchange reserves, and also support a host of ancillary industries. Also, this is a relatively recession-proof industry. To give you an example, the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development did a study, 2 studies in 2008 and 2010, where they noticed a contraction in global demand by 12%. But surprisingly, creative industries were still blossoming. their product went almost $500 billion research to that. So what it means is that, the promptings of heart, the mind, what we need in terms of ideas, not just fertilizers, but something for the mind, something for the heart, for the soul, that yearning is a very powerful element, and we should not just be dismissive of it as some softy elements which is not worthy of serious consideration and serious planning. Also, very briefly want to highlight that in 2008, African Union unveiled and adopted AU Plan of Action on Culture and Creative Industries. We have been talking about Africa Strategy 2063. When we talk about dovetailing the India story and the Africa story, we also got to take note of this very important document and the multiple possibilities opening there. The film industry, Bollywood, offers enormous possibilities. Now, before Chiru Naidu spoke about that, when we talk about public perception in India and Africa, is teacher, soldier, and actor. This actor is there, but we need a wider assemblage. We need musicians there, we need artists, we need thinkers, we need painters, we need a wider community of people that represents India and vice versa, the Africa to us. Now, Bollywood produces more than 1,000 movies a year. I want to bring out the example of Nollywood, the Nigeria's vibrant film industry, where they produce 50 movies per week. And each movie employs something like 130 to 150 people. You just multiply the numbers, the number of jobs created. So we are not just talking about fantasy. We're talking about real jobs on the ground. And here we're just talking about film industry. Similarly, you have another very vibrant African film festival called FESPAC, located in Senegal. Then you have Marrakesh. And now, refreshingly, some other countries like Ghana, Kenya, Cameroon are trying to replicate the Nollywood model. So, when we talk about the popularity of Bollywood films alone is not enough. Wherever you go in Africa, I said from India, and you rightly pointed out, they will talk to you about Shah Rukh Khan and Amitabh Bachchan and all that. But it's good that we must move beyond the feel-good factor and work out the strategy of bringing together the creative industries, the film industry, the music industry of the two sides. So this process of critical mass is creating a critical mass of people on the creative community will have to play a bigger role as we talk about transforming India-Africa relations in a meaningful sense. I just end my presentation with some suggestions. We heard since morning infrastructure fund, setting up infrastructure fund of different kinds. I would propose the setting up of India-Africa Culture Fund to bring together a wide network of private enterprises, passionate entrepreneurs, making money, real money. And that should take charge of organizing these interactive film festival, culture festival, music festival. Because when we talk about the public perception of Africa, we are now meeting ahead of the 3rd India-Africa Forum Summit. So there is a frenzy of activity suddenly. But notice after 2 months, 3 months, there's a dip. We also got to look at how to sustain this interest. You've got to have activities scattered throughout the year. Now, corporate houses have a major responsibility, not only in terms of social responsibility, but cultural responsibility as well. Because you cannot, if people, the two sides, do not know enough about each other's culture, values, because these creative industries are not just entertainment, they're also carriers of worldview, of beliefs, of value systems. So there is a lot at stake here. So culture fund of sorts with maybe a modest amount to start with will play the role of a catalyst. Similarly, one should give it an institutional shape and maybe think of a culture center which is exclusively dedicated to promoting the convergences and the multiple intertwining of Indian and Africa culture. My second suggestion is, a lot is being spoken about the dim perception and the very limited skewed knowledge of Africa here and other way around also partially. Why don't we launch something like a No Africa campaign here? Right. I would really be impressed if even in this audience, many of the people can name more than 20-25 countries, African countries here. And forget about their angularities, individualities, and the profiles. So No Africa campaign should be launched and supported by corporate. We should not rely just on government and blame them. There was critique of diplomacy, public diplomacy project, how it is focused in diaspora and all that. But instead of critiquing, that's one part of it, why don't we all join hands and do something about it? So that's second. And third, of course, this is partly being done, but not with enough success, which is about India-Africa Media Forum. We already have something called Editors Forum. I've been involved in that from the beginning. The first edition was held in 2008. Again, this will be held just before the summit. But the results have not been really very encouraging or dramatic. Yes, partly the discourse has changed, but if you look at the stories in Indian media about Africa, whatever stories appear, they are mostly sourced from Western news agencies. We cannot rely on intermediaries to explain each other to us. So that is something there, probably more thought is needed. Also, all those who complain about media's neglect of Africa should know that the media is a money machine. It's not a philanthropic enterprise. There are corporate, there is serious money involved there. So unless it is attractive to spend money to create those narratives, I don't know many people will really come forward. I mean, it's people like, I've been involved with a project called Africa Quarterly, a journal magazine that I edited for many years. My new enterprise, I represent a new media company, we're doing something there. But more of such efforts, more diversity is needed to promote such projects. So, ladies and gentlemen, the point which I'm making is that we need a little bit more soul and heart into this relationship. There got to be music of ideas and, soft infrastructure. And since morning, we've spoken about India-China comparison in an oblique sense, that in the end, in fact, this is a winning card in Africa. China doesn't have the diaspora in Africa the way we have. China doesn't, there is no Chinese equivalent of politics, for example. There's really, and there will never be at this scale, it's not that. So we have a major...
Even the Kung Fu movies.
No, they are not supposed to. You want us? I will tell you. How many of you?
It's not true. It's not true.
But it's what South Africa.
I'll give you the first floor intervention. Have you concluded?
No, I'm just concluding. So give me those because structured conclusions I recommend. So yes, I stand corrected, but in the sense of the say, yes, there is Chinese, but I'm told that Japan has been a much older actor in Africa than India, but they also do not have that cultural connection. So in terms of cultural connections, we have a winning card, and if we leverage it properly and complement it with the economic and strategic component. Now finally, I end with a quote by Nigerian novelist Ben Okri. He's written a book called A Time for New Dreams. And this is very relevant here. So I want to quote it because we're talking about public portrayal and misperception. He says, "It is easy to dismiss Africa. It is easy to patronize Africa. It is easy to profess to like Africa. It is easy to exploit Africa. And it is easy to insult Africa. But there is Africa in all of us. Africa is a dreamland and a spiritual motherland. We have to rediscover the true Africa of laughter, joy, creativity, and playfulness. It's Africa's turn to smile. That's the loveliest gift the world can give to keep Africa smiling." Thank you.
Thank you very much, Manish, particularly in coming up with very concrete suggestions towards the end, which are really good takeaways, I think. And something which is, in fact, inspired me to talk to the Jaipur Literature Festival.
There was a session, they have a session in Africa often. I remember attending one of them.
Yeah, they do that quite often. But the point which I was trying to make is what JLF has now done is to hold a JLF event in Boulder City in the US and another one in London. And I think I could probably suggest to do it in Nairobi as well. It is called Jaipur Literature Festival, it's called a Brand Equity. And it is probably the largest and the most popular of its type. And of course, in every festival which I attend, they have writers from Africa, from all parts of Africa. Naidu, just to add a fourth important player when Indians are perceived in Africa, which I have seen, are traders. And particularly exploitative traders. Indians are associated with in South Africa itself, why go? I mean, most of the African countries where Indian traders have been also exploitative, in the sense that these are questions which have been raised to me personally. As I said, we've been working in Africa through our own centers, and particularly, as I said, and we are quite proud to say that we built up local capacities, and all our managers are local people, they are not Indians, in order to build up that kind of capacity. With that said, let me open the floor. Sorry, would you like to go first? Mike, please.
Yes.
And since we have only about 15 minutes time for the closing, may I request the interveners to be very sharp, and I'll be as ruthless with you as I was with my families.
I'm the best, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry I intervened at that time, but just because...
Fair enough, you have a very valid point.
Companies will jump at it, whatever we have to offer. Completely forgetting that it's a very competitive environment. Electricity. I wanted to mention that you will be competing, Indian companies compete or are not able to compete against ESCOM from South Africa because of the local advantages. Therefore, you need to keep the competition factor not only from Chinese but from African companies which are come up very well. Africa is not a dark continent anymore. Second suggestion, we tend to believe that the labor there is very, very cheap. It's not that cheap. And the labor laws in some countries can be very, very rigorous.
Yeah.
Therefore, when you go there for agricultural sector, for example, Indian companies have not been able to succeed in South Africa because of the cost of labor and the labor laws. So all I wanted to suggest is that we need to keep the local factors in mind, labor, etc., and the competition from the African companies when we make those policies.
Thank you very much. Yes, please. Kiru.
Thank you, Chairperson. Just two very brief comments. I think just the first on Professor Chakarbarti's input on education. It makes a very important point about access and success. When you enroll African students or need any foreign students, but creating the conditions that enables those students to be successful and grow in the environment into which they come. We're extraordinary Indian institutions, and sometimes a pity when students who enter don't succeed in leaving with a degree for one or the other reason. And I think Mr. Manish Chan's contribution is very valuable. This idea of soft infrastructure is a very valuable input in terms of extending that relationship. The point about the three percentages that I mentioned was essentially when I said the positive aspects of it, that those three are better perceived in more positive light. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Yes, please, just a minute. There in the pink shirt, the two African gentlemen who will get a priority over others.
I fully agree with Manish about the need to boost the cultural and people.
Very sharp, please.
Yes, being very sharp, I would say that we need to boost contact in the areas of traditional medicines. There are a lot of herbal and traditional medicines and practices in Africa. And similarly, we have in India.
Thank you. Right at the back. The two African gentlemen, let us begin the one with the spectacles.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my own is for the Professor Milindo, sir. What he made mentions about the education in India for foreign students is right, because I can justify it. I am a research scholar here. We face a lot of negative experiences here. For example, like issue of housing. For somebody as a foreigner to get a house to rent, it's a problem. Because at times somebody may even give you. So there will be conflict from the neighbors. Neighbors will say they will not allow you as a foreigner to live in a particular house. So that is a negative experience which will discourage African students to come to India. And the issue of internship too. Because I have a lot of friends who are doing MSc here and all other programs, they could not get that opportunity. A slot where they could have their internship in India. They have to go back to their respective countries for that just 1 month and come back, which is a negative experience as well. So there are various issues, like issue of, like in class maybe, like, you know, English is an international language. At times, the academics used to speak Hindi. So that is another area where it requires a lot of attention. So these are areas where I justify what Professor Milindo said about how to have this partnership with education is the area. Then the second issue about the culture. Yeah, that is very, very important, more especially the role of media in propagating who are Africans in India. That is very, very essential because reflection and interaction socially as an African in India is a very severe situation. Sincerely speaking, even with auto to enter transportation, to go to market, you know, there are so many challenges as far as Africans are concerned in India, because if such media campaign is done and change the perception of the Indians about Africans, so that is very essential. That will encourage a lot of African students to come to India, because I believe there are a lot of people who like to come to India for studies, but some certain issues like my own experience and my colleagues' experience are preventing people to come. For example, like Nigeria, where I come from, there are a lot of people who are going to Malaysia, Ghana, and several countries. But India, if you look at the number of Africans coming to India, it's very, very limited compared to like Malaysia and all those Asian countries. What makes all those are all these negative experiences, which requires attention. Thank you very much.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
Do they face similar situation or far better situation in other countries like Malaysia?
Yes, because like me, my own masters I did it in the United Kingdom, and I came here for my PhD. So I have 2 countries' experience.
Very good.
So that is why I made mention of that, because my experience in UK is entirely different from my experience here in India. So that is why I could be able to even distinguish and come up with this point. So that's it.
Thank you. Your neighbor.
All protocols observed. I'm here to equally portray what my brother just shared. India and Africa, Nigeria. I'm from Nigeria. I've had a long relationship. I don't need, in my secondary school, I was taught by 2 Indians. One taught me, a woman taught me commerce. Mr. taught me biology. And a very good teacher. I was in the 80s. So, if other countries cannot succeed in Nigeria, I think India will succeed. So the area of cultural differences, and it has to do with media, you know, where we are staying in Greater Noida. We just had an occurrence last week where in a particular place, students, master students, undergraduates who are living quietly with their landlords, only for the neighborhood, what they call residents, to say Africans live. We are not compatible with, you know, all that kind of jungle justice. That's warranted also if we write our embassy. That's where the government of India, thank God for the evolutionary and revolutionary government of Modi, to break up certain things. I don't want to pass judgment because there are some states that are quite conducive. I don't know if we take time, but media have to do a lot of work, you know, to give enabling environment to portray what Professor Milindo has said. For Africans here to have a value chain, if I would say, for higher education, because it's a competitive environment, like my brother has said. You know, there are a lot of other countries competing that Nigerians come here. There are a lot of us, Nigerians travel all over the world for education. But if India is competitive enough, Nigerians like coming to India. But when coming to India becomes frustrating, they will stop coming. So, and it has to do with this cultural bias, creating an environment creating opportunity, even for us, that are here. I know in the course of my year, is an institution invited me in Gujarat to come and, because I'm a lecturer, if I have time to come and teach in their institution. That's what I like. I want to interact with the environment, and I'm not to be an onlooker. I like it to be accommodating, and it will inspire a lot of us to still come.
Thank you very much. Yes, please. Here. That would be the last question, and then we turn to the panel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have not a question, just a comment. I think as the comments have been. And what I wanted to say, just pick up a comment, remark that the Ethiopian ambassador had made in the morning, and she says that India is known well in Africa. On the contrary, Africa is not so very well known in India. And my suggestion, and particularly to Manish, because I agree with all that he has said, is that to get Africa better known in India, possibly we could use one instrument or one avenue that we could use is to reach out to schools and to reach out to the children. Because, after coming back to the country, I get invited to a large number of schools and they do projects on different countries. I think now this realization has come here. And they are doing project on Australia, on South Korea, on Japan. I have not seen any project being done on Africa. Maybe if we can sort of, go through some institutions like CBSC, KBS. I know that there are a large number of organizations of day schools. And if you can approach them and ask them to focus on Africa per se, or on
it's a very good idea. Very good idea.
So basically, through the children at different levels, they have what is known as MUN, the Model United Nations. And there also you find positions of different countries, except that I don't see African representations in those Model United Nations programs.
Thank you.
So maybe that would be.
Thank you very much. May I now turn to the
interventions made. Number one, on the issue of access versus success. I don't know whether I have understood your question properly, but let me just make this point very clear, that I have been teaching in a university for the last 5.5 years, where we have a good number of African students. And I have no hesitation in mentioning here that in most of my classes, most of the batches, the best performers are students from Africa. So there is no point arguing that whether there is a difference between access and success. And we are very proud of them, and many of them have become very successful in their next course of career. So it is not that they are lying behind. They are very much competitive with our Indian counterparts of students here in India. So I don't think the problem lies there. And of course, I would like to clarify a point that I should not be misunderstood. When I talk about the cultural divide, I would say that this is a phenomenon homogeneously observed all over the country. They are peculiar to some particular regions of the country. And in other regions, the cultural divide is not that strong. Rather, the level of cultural assimilation among the outside students and the local students are much higher. So I should stand corrected there. And thirdly, what Mr. Sajjanhar said, I am just recalling one of the discussions that we had in Kolkata Regional Consultation on South-South Cooperation. We invited some principals of higher secondary schools. And we had a discussion on how South-South cooperation can be extended at the school level as well. And I was really surprised to find that most of the principals even were ready to take the responsibility to invite students school students from Africa and host them here in India. And in exchange, wanted to send their own students to some African countries and spend their holidays there. So this urge that, as you are arguing, is already there among the education community and the school principals. So if the proposal comes and becomes concrete, I think that can be a very effective tool in creating a bridge that we claim to be existing historically, but maybe over the last 20 to 25 years have been severed somehow or other, that can be again re-established and made stronger. These are some of my comments on it.
Thank you, Rahul.
Just one small point and a suggestion. To agree to what Manish said, that African portrayals and success stories need to be learned, and this is something that's true for the globe, not just India. And I think the IT domain is one where there are a number of examples, like the first country in the world that made universal service obligations for mobiles was a Southern African country. Usually universal service in telecom was landlines, mobiles were an upstart. And so USO never applied to that, but it was pioneered in Africa. M-Pesa, which is widely recognized in the world. These are sorts of innovations that have come organically as opposed to externally. So I think there's a lot. Now this relates to what I believe could be one book. I don't know how to operationalize it. It's really mindset change. When we talk about agriculture, even education, and especially energy, everyone says, base is here, we know we want to reach here, it's going to be a long investment, struggle, and effort. But the path most people have thought of is traditional, and therefore you just need to multiply your resources, capital, fundamentalism almost. But the traditional BAU model may not be the right model. And to give one small example in the energy space, if you've got about 120 million homes and 5 people a home for 600 million people without access to energy, and you want to give them 50 watts of connectivity. Now, let's ignore whether it's solar lantern based, that's an expensive way, but if you're talking of the grid, 50 watts enough for some LEDs, charger, phone, basic needs as a starting point only. That's only with the central grid about 7 gigawatts of capacity, which is only a few tens of percent of the sub-Saharan capacity excluding South Africa. If you include South Africa, it's only on the order of less than 10%, far less than 10%. So why isn't this being done? Because the traditional grid was never meant to go out to first electrify the people and then get the market balancing done. There was no way to control that once you get a connection, you will not put an electric cook stove, you will not run a pump, for which maybe you would need to charge higher. But for basic human needs, it's something that's subsidizable, and that's the intervention model that India is doing. So it is said, the states may have electricity challenges, but the center is supporting you to get the physical access of wiring done. China did the same thing starting in the mid-80s or actually in the 90s, and they capital paid for it without saying, oh, can you afford it? Because it was just a basic human need that was agreed on. So I'm not against the market. We hear that term a lot, markets are efficient, but at some point markets don't take us fast enough for where we want to go, and that's where we need this intervention model or deviation from traditional business as usual models. So I think that's an opportunity for Africa, with or without India.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. In fact, all along, I was a teacher in the university and also myself. Now I think I'm a little bit particular about the students. If the opportunity is given to the optical students, they will excel even better than Indians. I will give you an example. One of my students came from Ethiopia and he did his PhD program under my guidance. Now he is the national coordinator in the field program in Ethiopia. Another lady, Britikon, now she is in US, a very eminent research scholar there. And very just about 3 years back, one student from Nigeria, with whom he was working there. I brought him under this Indian fellowship program, and within 3 years he completed his research program. Many of the Indian students never complete their PhD within 3 years. And also, what I did was, I asked him to bring his material and work with that. And that is particularly in rice, Nerica series rice, which have a lot of drought tolerance, he could develop very good lines. So only what I would like to say is, opportunity is very important and opportunity has to be given. There was one more guy whom I was working with, Krish, and I taught him the computer applications. After 3 months, he started teaching me the extra things of this. Whatever, they are really very good, but opportunity has not been given. If the opportunity is given, certainly they will do well. And coming to the farmers, because the farmers are quite intelligent there, but if we give the right input at right time and give the proper guidance, certainly they can perform very well. And again, in Africa, what I could experience is about the language problem. There are Francophone countries and Anglophone countries and some speaking both Vilas. So there, in Anglophone countries, we could succeed more because language is not a problem. But in countries like Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali, where I work, really I face a lot of problems because the language is a major problem, and we cannot convey what we want to convey. So for that purpose, the expert, we should be expert in communicating what we would like to communicate. That is the language we should learn before we go there. And coming to the seed industry, what I would like to say here is, you see, the economic condition, we have to look into it. You should not compare our economic condition with their economic conditions. And for that purpose, we should go to the grassroots level. See, but you want to make them effective with respect to food security. There we have to establish the small communities and the associations, and through those associations, if you can impart the knowledge, I think certainly they will take it. And again, I would like to say that capacity building is very, very important.
To go on, Africa, I got what you call far and wide, and we live there to understand what the problem is there. Having spent 20 years there and worked at very grassroots levels and various committees, I feel that there's total lack of skill in most sectors in agriculture. Particularly, I'm referring to the agriculture sector, there are a large number of Indian companies that are investors at home there, established large farms. And like our friend said, that they thought the myth was labor is very, very cheap there. Labor is not cheap. The labor laws are pretty stringent. And at the same time, the productivity level are very, very low. And even if you are able to train a labor for about something like a week or 10 days or a month or so, you're not assured that he's going to stay with you and you've got to start fresh. So, if anything can help Africa, is capacity building, skill development at every stage. And be it with the farming community, be it with the trainers, and every stage. Thank you very much.
Just very briefly, I think Ambassador Sajana's suggestion was excellent. Your initiative can maybe put up a session in Jaipur or maybe another literary festival centered around Africa. Just basically in Africa, yes, and focused on that. Just one basic point which I want to underline once again, that this whole business of transforming perception of Africa, it needs to be driven more and more by the corporate sector with large investments in Africa. You know, $35 billion, $70 billion bilateral trade. If you put in a little money, a small percentage, that can make a lot of difference, rather than relying on government's public diplomacy projects. You know, we have a series of events in the run-up to the India-Africa Forum Summit. Maybe one would have thought of literary or musical sort of festival, which would have added more dynamism to the whole exercise. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So that, as I said, this was a mosaic session. three different topics: education, agriculture, and energy, electricity, energy. So, and just the sort of takeaway that I have from this, and this is not limited to these takeaways, there could be many more. One is soft infrastructure, and this is something which we've been saying for long and practicing also. So it gives me an advantage of saying that with certain authority and capacity building, skills building, etc. And knowing that there are similar economic conditions quite often, in the sense that we all developing countries, we must realize that there are resource constraints of all types, financial, human, etc., and governance deficit as well, which is a common denominator, whether it's in India or sub-Saharan Africa, or in, I would say, the whole of Africa. Therefore, the kind of capacity building that we can do through appropriate knowledge and technology, rather than bringing in models from the West, would make much more sense. And that I see very clearly as a great advantage in this kind of partnership that we are talking about. And finally, I think what Manish spoke about is how do we develop mechanisms for better understanding, better cooperation, better understanding, or mutual understanding of each other, whether it's creative or non-creative as well. And to borrow words from Manish, which is what I like, we need to put more soul and heart into this kind of exchange, rather than just keep the partnership only on economic platform. With that, let me thank you all once again. And if you can give a big hand to me.